He gunned down his teacher. Today, a child gets the adult verdict.
Count one, we find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder with a firearm.
On the day mass murderer McVeigh was to die, the FBI director says still more misplaced evidence has turned up. The Bush energy plan. It's out officially tomorrow, already taking heavy fire today. And Eye on America, the risk of giving powerful adult drugs to children. CBS News investigates.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. There is a verdict tonight in a Florida murder case that drew national attention to a controversial trend in criminal justice, trying juveniles charged with serious crimes as adults. In this trial, the juvenile, 13 at the time of the crime, was charged in the shooting death of his teacher. CBS's Bobby Harley is on the scene, on the case, and has the verdict.
As to count one, we find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder with a firearm.
It's a verdict that could still send 14-year-old Nathaniel Brazil to prison for the rest of his life for shooting his teacher on the final day of school last year. A verdict Brazil's family understood.
No comment at this time.
But maybe couldn't believe how their child, a decent student, a band member, a kid who had never been in trouble before, could now face a punishment even he doesn't seem to comprehend.
He said, not too bad. That was the only comment he made. Those were the words he used, not too bad.
Maybe not too bad, because the West Palm Beach jury did not return the most severe conviction. In Florida, finding a first-degree murder would have automatically carried a life sentence.
I don't think Nathaniel can think past the next 10 minutes. He doesn't know 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in jail. It's lifetimes to him.
And that's why protesters have denounced these proceedings. Nathaniel Brazil was tried and convicted as an adult.
An unjust trial.
This is the second time in 2 months a Florida teen has faced life in prison after being convicted of murder. But prosecutors argue there are no winners in this kind of case. Maybe only lessons to be learned.
Is get to know our kids better, love our kids more, and make sure if there's something going wrong in their lives, we stop it before something like this, like another tragedy like this, ever affects any other community like it did ours.
The principal of the school where the shooting took place said he didn't know how he would break news of the verdict to his students. Students who lost not only a beloved teacher, but one of their peers, a fellow student whose fate still remains unclear until he's sentenced late next month. Dan?
Bobby Harley in West Palm Beach, Florida. This was the first day of the rest of Tim McVeigh's life, the day he was scheduled to die for the bombing mass murders in Oklahoma City. The execution is off till at least June 11th. And his lawyers said today McVeigh is considering all his legal options in light of the FBI's stunning failure to turn over thousands of pages of potential evidence. How did the FBI bungle the biggest murder case in U.S. history? That's what Congress wants to know, as CBS's Cheryl Atkinson reports.
For FBI Director Louis Freeh, the embarrassment just keeps on growing. A week after the FBI turned over thousands of pages of documents in the Oklahoma City investigation 6 years late, Freeh admitted today there may be still more.
On Friday evening, I ordered a complete shakedown of the FBI, telling each special agent in charge and assistant director that I would hold them personally responsible for this last effort. This latest scrubbing has produced additional documents.
The FBI is now reviewing the latest material to see whether it, too, should be turned over to defense lawyers. But Freeh says, like the other documents belatedly disclosed, they have no bearing on Timothy McVeigh's guilt. Still, Representative David Obey called the FBI's troubles astounding.
It's a pitiful performance, which is feeding the paranoia of large sections of this country, and that's the last thing that we can afford these days.
Freeh was at a loss to explain why, when it came to the bombing investigation, almost every FBI field office, 47 of them, failed to fully comply with one explicit request after another to turn over anything and everything. Free said the FBI sent 12 separate records requests to its field offices in 1995 and 96. Then, when undisclosed material kept cropping up, the FBI issued further directives. Documents were still turning up late last week when Free ordered the 16th and latest record search.
Why wasn't there a thorough hand search conducted in addition to the electronic?
It's one of the questions that we have to answer. We have an obligation in the FBI to produce, in this case, every single one of those records.
I understand.
And we failed in that.
Free, who's leaving the FBI next month, said today the FBI should create a new Office of Records Management and hire a world-class expert to run it. Also, he ordered every FBI employee to get new records training and yearly refreshers. Dan?
Cheryl Atkinson. Former FBI agent Robert Hansen was indicted today for espionage. Federal prosecutors said Hansen, a 25-year FBI veteran, spied for Moscow for more than 15 of those years, passing information that led to the execution of Russians working for U.S. intelligence. If convicted, Hansen could face the death penalty. The mayor of a Pennsylvania town torn by racial rioting in 1969 said today he will be arrested tomorrow on murder charges linked to the shooting death of a black woman during the riots. Mayor Charlie Robertson of York, Pennsylvania, was a police officer at the time. Prosecutors have not detailed the allegations against him, but Robertson angrily denies the charge.
Murder is the charge. I'm standing here in disbelief as to the charge, which they must prove. And to this, I maintain my innocence.
Robertson, who is running for a third term as mayor of York, Pennsylvania, has repeatedly apologized for racist views he expressed at the time of the riots. On the CBS Market Watch, it appears Wall Street is suddenly a lot more optimistic about the U.S. economy. Investors drove back into the market today, sending prices soaring. The Dow closed with a big gain, 342 points, putting the blue chip index back above 11,000 for the first time in 8 months. The Nasdaq was up 80 points today. The government says consumer prices rose a modest 0.3% in April. What little inflation there was, the result of higher energy prices. Vice President Cheney says you can't blame high gas prices on OPEC, and now it appears because OPEC is making it very clear the oil cartel will not help bring prices down. Their basic message is, show us the money. The head of OPEC said today that despite appeals from the U.S., OPEC will not boost production. So, what will President Bush do about the U.S. energy crunch? CBS's John Roberts reports we're about to find out.
In Cedar Rapids, Iowa today, some businesses had their power shut off for a third straight day to avoid wider blackouts. Across the country, gasoline prices hovered at near record levels. At the White House today, President Bush received his long-awaited national energy policy and declared help is on the way.
This isn't just a report that's going to gather dust. This is an action plan, because this is an action administration.
The president will officially unveil the plan tomorrow. 105 specific proposals in total. 42 will be directed at conservation, energy efficiency, renewable resources, and alternative fuels. But the majority are designed to increase supplies of oil and electricity from both domestic and international sources. Environmental groups are already hammering the president for catering to big oil and coal.
The oil and coal lobby contributed millions to its new leader. Problem is, he's also our president.
Tomorrow, with a pointed new ad campaign, the Greens will declare all-out war on the White House.
Environmental organizations are going to mount the biggest campaign we have ever mounted to try to get this energy policy to address the concerns of consumers and to protect the environment, and not to weaken major environmental protections.
The administration is also fending off attacks that there is nothing in the plan to immediately address the growing electricity crisis and the high cost of gasoline. Just the fact that there is now an energy policy will instill confidence in the markets, they said. Supplies will go up, prices will come down.
This is the first comprehensive energy policy probably ever, certainly in a long time.
But it may be more a matter of good timing. With oil and gasoline stocks increasing, Energy Department officials this week projected that the price of gasoline would peak by Memorial Day. And even without the Bush plan, the industry is expected to bring on enough supply that the price of gasoline, natural gas, and electricity is forecast to decrease in the next 10 years. Dan?
John Roberts at the White House. As for the reaction in a Republican-controlled Congress to the Bush energy plan, the blame game and finger-pointing has already started. CBS's Bob Schieffer has that part of the story from Capitol Hill.
The president's plan isn't even public yet, but word that it won't provide much immediate relief from high energy prices sent House Republicans on the defensive, claiming high prices were not their fault.
We basically inherited this issue.
Over the last 8 years, this problem has been ignored.
I think it's time for the Democrats now to get working on solutions and quit trying to hang the rap on somebody else.
Don't bet on that. Democrats remember what happened to their man Jimmy Carter when America ran out of gas in the 1970s. So even though they haven't seen the president's plan, they hammer it almost hourly for what they say is not in it: immediate relief.
The president has no program for the short term, telling people, telling California, telling the West Coast they're on their own.
There doesn't appear to be any sense of real urgency here.
Senate Republicans support the administration's long-term approach to increase energy production, but with even the president's home state of Texas now facing possible energy shortages, they're telling the White House immediate help is also needed. Texas's Republican senator favors tax credits for consumers who conserve energy.
We do need to help people who are having real problems paying their bills. We need to look at incentives for conservation, and these are things I think we can do.
So whatever the president proposes, it won't be enough for Capitol Hill, where people are already getting nervous about the next election. If the president does not propose some short-term relief, expect Congress to come up with a plan of its own. For all their differences, Republicans share one thing with Democrats. They, too, remember what happened to Jimmy Carter. Dan.
Bob Schieffer on Capitol Hill. American politicians are not the only ones with problems because of high fuel prices. And in Britain today, things got pretty nasty for one of them. Deputy Prime Minister John Prescott was edging past a group of protesters when one jumped him. It didn't last long, and the burly Prescott gave as good as he got before the protester was hauled away by police. Next here on the CBS Evening News, Eye on America investigates children taking powerful antipsychotic drugs. And then later, meet Governor Mom. She has new twins and new political problems, too. The House of Representatives voted today to restore President Bush's first official act after taking office. In what amounts to another U-turn in policy, the House voted to reinstate the ban on federal funding for family planning groups overseas that even discuss abortion with clients. In tonight's Eye on America, CBS concludes a hard news investigation into new and powerful antipsychotic drugs meant for adults that are now being prescribed for children. These drugs can have serious side effects, and it turns out some of the children who take them aren't even psychotic. CBS's Wyatt Andrews has the mind-boggling facts on this.
Do I sound crazy to you? No.
17-year-old Karina is not an adult and is not schizophrenic. But for years, the Florida foster care system kept her drugged on antipsychotic medications meant for adults. That includes a drug favored by psychiatrists called Risperdal.
If you get upset like one time, one little bit, a little itty bitty, you start raising your voice or something, like, oh, give her some medication. Just like that.
That's how it works.
Yeah. Because there's no other way they can control us, so they say.
Children's advocates say Karina's story is part of a national epidemic of legal drug abuse, in which children who are not mentally ill are prescribed powerful psychotropic medicines that have only been safety tested for adults.
These kids are shaking, these kids are drooling, these kids are sleeping, these kids are zombies.
Miami law professor Carolyn Salisbury says the Florida foster care system puts too many kids in what she calls a chemical straitjacket.
They're using the kids' bad behavior to justify doping them up with antipsychotic drugs. They're supposed to be used for schizophrenia or other severe disorders.
Mental health experts say this controversy is part of a bigger picture. Psychiatry in general today favors drugs over counseling. Managed care likes drugs because they are cheaper than therapy, and the drugs themselves are more effective than ever. Add that trend to the troubled population of children in foster care, and child advocates see a prescription for abuse.
Psychiatry is out of control when it comes to drugging children.
Dr. Peter Bregan is a zealous critic of drugs in psychiatry. He says giving children new generation psychotropic drugs like Risperdal is dangerous.
The effect is basically a chemical lobotomy, but then it reaches to the point of negligence when the laziness is to drug our children rather than to resolve our conflicts with them. You can't drug a child into submission without harming that child.
In Florida, foster care officials admit they don't know the long-term safety of these drugs. But Dr. Eric Handler says in some severely troubled children, a drug like Risperdal can make the difference between going to jail and going to school. If the true safety and effectiveness of these drugs hasn't been well studied, why are they given to children at all?
A lot of times, those are the only medications that can be used for that specific diagnosis.
I just needed somebody to talk to.
The Florida Department of Children and Families is now investigating charges it has misused antipsychotic drugs in foster care. The federal government and several physician groups have called for studies to see if the psychotropic drugging of children is out of control. In Miami, Wyatt Andrews for Eye on America.
Next on the CBS Evening News, the governor is a new mother. What's wrong with that? Just ask her political opponents. In the Middle East today, Israel and the Palestinians accepted in general a plan for peace talks proposed by a commission led by former U.S. Senator George Mitchell. But there was no let-up in the violence. Israeli helicopters rocketed the offices of Palestinian police, injuring at least 10 people. Also today, Israel admitted its attack early Monday on a Palestinian police outpost, which killed 5 officers, was a mistake. Israeli officials say the intended targets were part of an elite Palestinian security unit accused of attacking Israelis. In this country, the acting governor of Massachusetts is in the hospital tonight for 2 of the best reasons in the world. Twins. Barely a month after taking office when her predecessor resigned, 36-year-old Jane Swift gave birth by cesarean section last night. And as CBS's Jim Axelrod reports, her plans to stay on the job gave birth to a political dispute.
The flowers mark an American first. Massachusetts Governor Jane Swift, seen here last month, is the first U.S. governor ever to give birth in office.
She's going to do what new mothers do. She's going to fawn over her kids.
But the governor's given birth to controversy as well by dictating the terms of her own maternity leave.
I will call the meeting to order.
She'll run things by speakerphone while she scales back work at home. 2 months, full pay.
I don't think anyone would blink in this technology-connected age if a CEO of a major corporation was doing his business from his yacht or his home or his hospital bed.
Guess again, Democrats will challenge this Republican's plan to telecommute in court. While attacking a pregnant woman might not make for the best politics,
she's going to take the summer off with full pay.
Swift's leave would be 4 times the average state workers, so not everyone's feeling warm and fuzzy on the Howie Carr show.
I take a lot of calls, and a lot of women have accused me of being a moron and a caveman over the last few days. But you know what? Some women have said, you're right. Howie, I work for the state, and I had to scrape together all of my vacation and sick time, and I still didn't get paid for a few weeks.
The idea of a governor running a state by phone, first from the hospital and then from home, isn't exactly new in New England. In fact, this is the 2nd time it's happened here this year.
I will be entering Johns Hopkins Hospital for prostate surgery.
But when Rhode Island Governor Lincoln Almond did it, no one made a peep.
Men and women are certainly being treated differently in this position.
In Massachusetts tonight, they're debating gender and politics. Here, where kissing babies is fine for politicians, but delivering them is another question altogether. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, Boston.
There's a follow-up tonight on the story of the runaway train in Ohio. As we reported last night, the 48-car freight train rolled for miles across northwestern Ohio with no one at the controls until a brave trainman jumped aboard and brought it to a safe stop. So how did the train escape in the first place? Turns out the engineer meant to set 3 brakes as he got off in a Toledo switching yard, but one of them turned out to be the throttle. And so it was woo-woo and goodbye train. That's part of our world tonight. I'll be back at 8, 7 Central with a Wednesday tonight edition of 48 Hours. One of the hardest-working correspondents in television, Harold Dow, has a preview for you.
The most powerful tornado ever recorded.
Major, extremely dangerous.
Oh my God, this thing's right on top of us.
This family was directly in its path.
And then it dawned on me, where's my children?
Tornado, tonight's 48 Hours.
48 Hours tonight at 8, 7 Central. We invite you to join us then and right here tomorrow for the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. See you soon on 48 Hours.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online, at keyword CBS News.
Did gene-altered food make her sick? Eye on America tomorrow. Experience CBS News.